That's a lot of trouble. This one.
All right,
divert
well,
some of
good
the traffic.
evening, y'all.
Or
Thank
maybe
you for
some
being
over but
here
it needs to divert some traffic.
for this very important discussion. So the way it'll work, in just a moment, we'll do our pledges. There will be a short presentation, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions, comments, thoughts, solutions, challenges, whatever it might be. And then after that, then it'll be opened up for council to discuss. And so let's do it. If you'd please stand for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, and once again, this is just a very informal town hall. So we're going to turn it over to the city manager for our short presentation.
You know, they say short and then it doesn't come out that way, just so you know.
How about if I put you on a timer? Would that work?
Probably.
Because I
I
could.
haven't been in the debate since high school, okay? So the presentation is available if you didn't grab a copy. This is a very informal data gathering kind of start to this process. I wanted to put together a little something. I'll try to be a little bit better prepared for the next one to have it out ahead of time. One of the things that I want to go over is kind of the concept of our workshops, like why do we have a budget workshop? What are the topics? Today we're looking at the capital improvement plan and strategic planning. They tend to be topic focused. One, to narrow down the conversation, to get as much data on those specifics. Two, to keep it on track, but every meeting we can talk about everything. This is a quote that I've always liked. The budget is not just a collection of numbers, it's an expression of our values and aspirations. This is from the former United States Secretary of the Treasury, David Blue. I've kind of always liked it. If you look at my budget, you can definitely tell what my values are. So why do we have workshops? So the workshops, and it's not just budget, we've done the town hall meetings for the strategic planning. I know Rick's putting together his own town halls as well. But for the budget, they're important for communities as they provide an opportunity for residents, community leaders, local government officials, just to come together and talk. Historically, Alpine has not had anyone in attendance, but maybe one or two people. So I'm excited that we have 5 because we're going to count Abel.
He's a volunteer. We didn't volunteer you to do this, right, Abel?
We pay him to be here.
Yeah.
You mean? The reason we haven't had the participation, I think, is because we haven't actively requested it. We haven't actively engaged our community. Not that any one person has done that intentionally. It's just not been a process. This past year, it's been very known that we're trying to engage our community more. Positive or negative, we're going to get both sides, but we really want everyone to be here. This allows for the open dialogue, transparency, and collaboration with kind of determining our allocation of resources within our community. Everyone will be on my front door when it comes to taxes, for debt, if we go out for any type of debt. But when it comes to making those decisions moving forward, they typically don't attend. Not only do it encourages the dialogue and transparency, but the collaboration and consensus building. The workshops that we have for the strategic planning were a key part in moving forward with our budget as well. It's kind of getting people together to understand this is your community. How do you want this community to grow? How do you want us to move forward? So that's kind of the idea. It's to share your ideas and perspectives. If you've not heard me say it, I've said it in the past. You can have Megan's plan, but you might not like it. So we're trying to actively get this to be a community project. Oh, we got another person. We have 6.
Hi, Tana. Grab a handout. Thank you for coming. It's
No,
okay. This is
welcome.
very informal. It's not a formal city council meeting.
So the topics typically that are considered when looking at a budget are your capital improvement plan or projects. One of the main topics that we're going over today is the capital improvement plan. I added projects to it because when you look at it, it really is projects. We haven't designed our plan for an actual growth plan, an actual, how are we going to maintain long-term? How are we moving forward? We've designed it more for, let's get a project completed. This is important because as we evaluate and prioritize capital projects, we want to have this discussion. Out of the strategic plan, the big one that came out of that, of course, was infrastructure. And this is typically what you see in your improvement plan. It's your building construction, your road repairs. A big one that we don't address or haven't fully addressed is technology. Times are changing and the city needs to keep up with that. And of course, all of the large equipment purchases. One item that I'll be talking about in the capital improvement plan is making some significant changes as to what is considered a capital equipment, capital project. I do believe there should be a value assessed to it. It shouldn't be something that we just probably can't budget accordingly. For instance, in our current CIP, we have condos for 10,000. Most capital assets or capital purchases are well above that. So we're going to look into that. Revenue discussion. This is one of the largest topics that is discussed with budgets. This goes over all of the revenue sources such as taxes, fees, grants, intergovernmental transfers, and then of course, anticipation of growth and decline. What direction is our city moving? This one will be an important one this year as we look at the taxes and future debt collection if needed. So on this agenda item, when we come up to it at another meeting, I hope to have lots in attendance. The next category is typically expenditures. This is identifying and prioritizing community and department needs. The reason why I wanted to make sure I included department is a community as a whole looks at the big picture, looks at your community, looks at your potholes, looks at your water and wastewater infrastructure. Our department looks at what do they need to operate day to day. A lot of it could be simple items. It could be anywhere from a new computer to 2 new employees. So I thought it was important that we added that department language to it because as they move forward in trying to address all of the issues of our community, we need to make sure they have the day-to-day resources. Some of the side notes to this I wanted to point out was community requests. Let me rephrase that. I think the public overlooks the fact that the city does help other entities, whether it be a nonprofit, a community organization, or a citizen group. The city does provide services, whether financial or in-kind contributions. So I thought that was an item that needed to be kind of targeted out so that people could see we're not just about the city, we're about the community. So the first part of this meeting is the capital improvement plan. So the capital improvement plan is structured and there are requirements to it set by our charter. So our charter does require the city manager to prepare and submit to the city council a 5-year capital program, at least gave myself 2 extra ones, guys. 3 months,
Well,
3 months prior to the final date of submission of the annual budget. So the capital program should include a clear summary of its contents, a list of all capital improvements, cost estimates, methods of financing, time schedules, annual cost of operating and maintaining, as well as a capital program shall be revised and extended each year with regard to capital improvements. So if you look at the prior years and you look at our capital improvement plan, it has changed significantly over the past 5 years. Some of those items, we don't let the public know we completed it. It's on a plan, but we don't say, hey, we finished it. It's on a plan and the next year it's not on a plan. Well, maybe we completed it or maybe priorities changed and it was removed. So as we move through the past several years, I've tried to update it to provide more information to the public and to council as well, because it'd be nice, like, hey, you had that item in there about replacing the console at the police department. Was it ever done? We don't do a good job with saying, yes, it was completed. Of course, this shall be published in a newspaper and council does have to adopt it. with or without amendments, before the 15th day of the 12th month of the current fiscal year. So that would be before September 15th. And then a copy of it is required to be kept, and then a public area, Geo keeps our copies. It's also available on the website. So what I provided in the packet, and we don't have to go over it line item by line item, but I just wanted to have a discussion with council really. Is a summary. It's the overview of where we're at. What is important to understand is the years are changing. So you'll see some, like the very first item, Pueblo Nuevo. So this one was actually started in 21. Even though this 5-year capital plan is for fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 28, I felt it important to make sure that the public and the council understood that just because we're in that 5-year time period, this has started some of these before that time period. So it's important to see that this isn't something new on this summary. It's actually been in place for some time. The Pueblo Nuevo Parks is specifically the matching portion. So the city does have to provide that matching. So it is included in the capital improvement plan, not only because it is a phased out project, but that it is an actual improvement to our community. The outdoor lighting. So this first section, backing up one step here, is these are the current and active. These are like in play as we speak. And so this is the very forefront of it. I wanted everyone to see the outdoor lighting. Council did pass that ordinance in 2021. And so the city is out of compliance. We have several street lights in particular, 196 or 93 that are non-compliant. We have several buildings that are non-compliant. And of course, we had 5 years. We're down to 3 years. It was important that we put money aside or put this in our capital improvement plan, because this isn't something I can go out and buy a new light bulb and fix. If we could, you'd see all of us out there changing lights. We have been very fortunate. It is current and active as of now, even though we didn't anticipate starting it until next fiscal year, because AEP is ahead of the game. They have completed Presidio and gotten them completely compliant on their street lights. And so we were next in line. So next week, in a few days, AEP should be out, and they are going to start replacing 396 street lights with the required compliant outdoor lighting lights. So that's really exciting because this is a zero cost to the city currently.
It's just street lights, not
Yes.
building lights.
Well, the city, do you know what areas they're doing? I mean, they're picking which areas to do, or is the city putting in, we'd rather have downtown, or how is it being determined?
Well, I'm not supposed to know they're starting next week.
Oh.
A little birdie told me, in working with the Big Bend.
Conservation Alliance.
Thank you. I was gonna say community action. Shelley gave me a call saying, hey, heads up, AEP should be in town next week. So I did follow up with Blake and I'm waiting for a response. I don't know how they're gonna start off, if they're just gonna start from one side of town and come straight through. But remember that we did receive funding from the Big Bend Community Alliance, Conservation Alliance, to help replace those. So the first go around will be at their cost, but it's not all streetlights. It's only the ones that are non-compliant. And most of them are south side,
And there's 193.
93, 96. I can't remember the exact number.
And they're gonna fix them all.
Yes.
There's one right by my house, just so you know.
I'm guilty with you. I actually own one that is non-compliant.
So maybe are the ones down in Holland.
Not all of them, no.
So bulbs that go up, I presume those are not.
Those are non-compliant and those are actually city owned. They're not AP or TxDOT monitored. So the pretty fancy, we would actually have to go in and fix those ourselves. And the last quote I received was about 2,500 a piece.
How many of them are there?
10.
Did you buy a whole new fixture?
That's basically buying the new fixture. I opted for black spray paint, but was told that.
Oh, okay.
Just spray the top part. So just really excited. This wasn't foreseen to be active until later, but because AEP is ahead of the game, it has been moved to the current active list to show that we are moving forward with it at zero cost. The other item on the active list is the GIS system for the utilities. So all of these amounts are estimates coming from the different departments or from quotes that have been received by the city. So when I look at the GIS system and I get a quote for $250,000, obviously this is something we have to plan for. This isn't a one-time expense. In light of the lead and copper requirements by the EPA and TCEQ, having this GIS system would have helped us significantly. I've already reached out to ERSI, which is the GIS system our gas department uses. They don't use the full platform. They only specifically use a portion of it for their monitoring of their assets for gas, the steel and the poly. And I reached out, just really got bored, picked up the phone and said, hey, what would it cost us? What would we need to do? Where could we start? The individual that I spoke to was really forthcoming with information and kind of was wondering where we got the quote for $250,000. Nowhere close to that.
For the layperson, GIS stands for,
Geographic Information Systems.
okay, and it's the mapping of all of our plumbing, basically, right? Not just.
Potentially, yes.
I mean, it has
So
that.
this is the best part of that conversation.
Is
Is-
it cheaper?
It is a lot cheaper.
Okay.
We may already have the data sets. I have two different groups working on not only ERSI and ESR, thank you.
Esri.
There's so many different ones, I know. The reason why I reached out to them first was because one, we already have the system in place with the gas. Two, I reached out to the Rio Grande Council of Governments because they have a GIS system and asked them, hey, can we use your GIS system? Catherine also in a meeting said, hey, can we just buy a license off of you?
Yeah.
They weren't really forthcoming with, yeah, here's a license, it's gonna cost you X amount, but they're willing to work with us. So they're seeing if our data sets will upload into their software. If they do, they'll help us print out the maps. Well, for us, we know that the maps may or may not be correct. We've had that issue with the prior engineer that did the work, prior employees. Reaching out to Esri, the beautiful side of it is because we already have one set of data through the gas department, we can actually add additional data sets, not the whole software at once. But this is our water, this is our wastewater. And this is the one that I absolutely love because of the question you just asked. Streetlights, where they can start, but it's our whole road system as well. It's our stop signs, it's our, we don't have street lights, but if we did, it's our, all the different types of signs we have throughout the system. It's the streets themselves. And I've worked with GIS very little, but I loved how he provided the information to have all the overlays. So you can see the city as a whole, you've got 1,000 different colors running through your roads. And then as you pick up each overlay, you see just water, just gas. I've seen individual maps, but having him show me a city with everything was beautiful. And we don't have to do it all at once. We don't have to do water all at once. We don't have to do gas all at once. We can buy little pieces and then build up as we need. Go ahead, Steve.
All right, I didn't know how informal this was.
It's informal.
It's very informal. In fact, I had also meant to say, this door's open, correct? If you need to go to the restroom, just anytime, just go. Okay.
We just need to make sure that we have the ability, somebody, whomever that person is, one identifying person, but to the ability to modify these maps. We don't just want a printed map to come our way.
Oh, no, and that was the cog side, a printed map. Actually accessing the ISRI system, we would be able to go and put new manhole, new whatever, you know, the data set that he was showing me, especially with the lead and copper. And someone would have to have obviously the training, was he could pull up in this particular city, every lead and copper that they had in the ground. Because they had them all labeled. They had all these little data sets, these little points, and each little point has identifying information. You know, if it's a cross intersection, if it's a a certain size pipe or whatever. It was really fascinating to watch. So I have sent him a couple of our files that we had received by a prior engineer to see if they are able to open them up in their software. I should know something hopefully next week. The sooner the better. If the data is easily accessible, we're one step ahead of the game.
So is this a one-time cost or is this have like a upkeep?
It has an annual fee, and you would definitely want to make sure you had multiple people trained. So I know of 2 people who currently have that type of training, one who kind of volunteered that she'd help us.
Volunteered or voluntold?
She has some understanding of it, and then Adeline Bill also has a little bit of the understanding of it as well.
For the licensing, does that mean we would fall under the licensing of the Rio Cog?
No, we would have our own.
Okay, I think that's very important that we have our own, and that's just the cost of doing business. So that we don't fall under, if they didn't renew or anything else.
Well, and for me right now, the COG is also helping us, just a little extra information out here. They're helping us update our annexation map. It hasn't been updated since 18, 17.
Yeah, 18 or 19.
And so we have a couple properties that are showing still in the county, but they've actually been annexed, including Skyway 1, the Dollar General. The beautiful side of that is as she's updating that, she's got those data sets that, they would give to us and we can have that in our system as well. So it's not just a currently one department use, it would become a citywide use and everyone would have access to their information. And then I would have one person who would have access to the whole system.
Do you think this is very important to get this situated before we start on projects such as water and wastewater, map those out as we start these large infrastructure projects?
I think it needs to go hand in hand. They need to run together. If we wait, we're just pushing back deadlines and we're prolonging our problem.
So Darren, probably, have you heard of rotating license?
No, I have not.
Okay, so these big software packages, they're gonna want you to buy a license for every user.
Yes.
But they also have a rotating license, which, for example, you have 5 designated users, which only have 3 licenses, which means only 3 of them can be on.
At the same time, that doesn't mean that the other 2 can't be on when one's off.
Right.
I don't know if
exactly.
it's turned that way.
Right, but and again, they will try and want you to buy 5 licenses. But the license is what it's really all about. That's where the money is. So see if you can't get I've always heard of rotating license.
Simultaneous users.
That's
Number of simultaneous users, yes. Another thing on the infrastructure that I never see come up. Sol Ross and Gallego, I know, were initially put in for storm drainage. And they were designed for runoff. Because everything from Sol Ross comes down Sol Ross. And if you drive after a big rain, Gallego is underwater. And again, this is my opinion, but I think I can back it up. You keep recoding the streets, but you don't take away what you put the years before. So in the case of Sol Ross, you've added about 1.5 inches of new pavement, which took away 1.5 inches times 50 of water displacement down Sol Ross Street.
Lots of streets.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not just those two.
Again, I'm not sure all the streets. I think another one that was originally designed to be part of your storm and runoff was Del Rio. I think Del Rio also was originally designed for that. But the way you're doing the streets right now, you're actually defeating that design. And I think that's something that probably need to start adding to your utilities or your infrastructure budget. Well, no, the drainage streets actually come down in the middle. Because it wants to be a vessel that takes the water away.
That would be Murphy. So Murphy Street does have, and it was a grant project that put that concrete right down the middle so that it came down and the water goes straight to the creek.
I think you're filling those crowns up.
Making some notes. So this would be a citywide, I'm gonna say. Okay. The other two items that are current and active is the taxiway expansion. We did budget it as a CIP for 23. We put $60,000, not only in the CIP, but in the actual operating budget. We are just dependent on getting a completed RFP. So it will go out next week. Hopefully we'll have people respond. And then we can move forward with that. The other,
Question on that one real quick. I see the Pueblo Nuevo, that's a 50-50 grant. Is the taxiway expansion a grant?
it can be yes.
80-20 or?
No, it'd be 50-50. That is dependent on ramp grant reimbursement.
So Megan, just help me a little bit on the numbers. For example, Pueblo, we're not spending 425.
No, we've budgeted the full amount for if anything goes wrong. Or not budget, I'm sorry. We've indicated in the CIP the full amount, because that would be the value that comes back to the city.
So I understand from an asset management standpoint, why wouldn't we list our investment, what the grant is, and then what the asset value is? Because I get the asset value on track, but from our standpoint, we're interested in how much money we allocate to it.
So let me add a column that is,
Because, for example, you walk through, for example, the lighting. What I think I heard was we're getting an asset of 175,000, zero cost.
no, right now, we're getting an asset of 175,000. It's gonna cost the city 155.
Okay,
Right,
that's
so,
fine.
yeah, I'll split it.
But it's that way, it helps because we don't have enough money to do all we need. And when we get down to the end, it's gonna be, where we're gonna drive for the priorities and where the shortfalls could be, so that'll help us.
Okay, so then I will add another column. This is just a summary, guys, in a draft. So I'll add another column that shows city portion and outside
That'd
funding.
be great.
And I don't want to say the exact funding because it's gonna be a hit and miss on if we get a grant or.
Or total project versus city expense.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And on Pueblo Nuevo, are we allowing for the extra costs that we're gonna have, the extra costs that we're gonna have on that?
Right now, we are trying to get a meeting set up with Kincaid to know the final cost of the contract, like what he will settle, will agree on, negotiate. To know if we will be outside that. Right now, we've tried to work really hard within the allowable
budget.
expense, yeah. We're trying not to go over. If it does go over, it would be an item before council saying, do you want to go over or not? And the other item on the taxiway, and this one, Rick, will have to be split out as well, is the update on the master layout plan. So this one is budgeted, actually budgeted this year for the city's portion. But we are very reliant on TxDOT to invoice us. So it's not until they're ready that we actually pay that invoice. So we may not spend that money this year, which you may see it come up in the budget again for next year. This one, the city allocated themselves to several projects at the airport. This is the next one in line. The reason this is the next one in line is because for us to do any of the other projects, we actually have to have a plan for the airport. That's for growth, that's for relocation, that's for maintenance. So it was really important that we took care of that first before we did anything else, because we had a couple set up prior to this, so we switched them around.
2 questions. Is this a grant as well? And then how long does a master plan, how long is that valid?
So it would be a 10-year master plan. This is a grant funded, and it is 75-25 or 80-20. It depends on what category they end up putting us. We've budgeted currently 25,000.
That would cover the higher amount or?
From what I was told with our then planner, 25 would be the high. We've gone through 4 planners in the past year.
Ian, sorry, I've got another question. So let's go back up here to the park, the Pueblo Nuevo. So you say it's for a period, 2021 to 2025, then you put 425. Is that the 24 budget alone, or is that the cumulative?
That's
budget?
the cumulative for the whole
I would
project.
say all of these are cumulative.
Yes.
And on the taxiway, by design, they're not night sky compliant. So do we have taxiway lights that we can turn on and off? We have. Is that
So-
all?
No, they're not on all night.
Not all night.
Currently, they are. Currently, they are because we are replacing half of our lighting system and we've had some fuse issues. So they have them where they're photo cells, so as soon as it gets dark, they come on, and when it becomes daylight again, they'll go off. Once the project's completed, they are actually radio key, which means only when the plane's coming in, they turn them on. Once they land, it takes it, what, 20 minutes after you land, 30 minutes?
About 20 minutes max, but we can also turn them off. So when you come in, you click 7 times, the lights come up. When I pull off the taxiway, I click and turn them off.
That was my question. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good answer.
At Universal.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody
So-
knows how to
so-
do that. Okay.
Yeah, now, if you're flying tonight, you better well figure out. If you're not, you're not. So you actually key into the frequency for the airport. And that's what drives the lights. So different airports have different frequencies, so you gotta know all of them.
And every frequency has an expense for every city.
Yep.
Okay, next group. So the next group is the CIP for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. And back to your comment, Guy, the fiscal year is the length of when the funding could possibly happen. Some of these you'll see have a 23 in them, or maybe a 21, because we've slowly been trying to figure out, have we put money aside? Do we have it in reserves? You know, it's already started. I don't want to take them off because we're still moving forward. Just not initially how we had it planned. So the first page is the general fund. And what I did was every department provides, we call it their CIPs. I've changed the format significantly, which you don't see here tonight. But every one of these has a single page explanation, priority, cost. It also breaks down the cost by year, if we're gonna put money aside every year, or if we did plan to move forward with the project. Ideally, we would have money set aside every year, or moving forward with the project, this is what we would know we need to save every year.
So Megan, in case you're wondering why we're flipping around, we don't have a copy of that. Not a big deal. We'll just have to look on the screen. It just.
We're blind, so.
We can see that.
8.6 is not in everything.
Well, I do apologize. We did have copier issues today.
Yeah.
Wait, let me add it. Let me see if the.
Wait a minute, yeah, mine has page 6.
Mine does.
I go from page 10 to
I
13.
don't have 8, I don't have
I'm just.
2, I don't have 6.
Oh, will you guys switch yours out? The second group of copies, I bet you the individual didn't do two-sided.
Here, there's some more, just.
Yeah,
Is yours
so
two-sided? Here,
mine's 2-sided.
no. Is yours two-sided?
How many of you need it?
At least 2, 3.
Rick
I'm
needs
not
it.
sure.
You want
I'm on my
tea?
staff. They did a great job.
That's okay. I mean, that's just a minor thing. It's okay. In the grand scheme of everything.
Guys' copies.
It's playing.
It was.
Just to make sure we were staying awake, right?
Mushroom trees.
Yeah,
Eat me in the dark and feed you bullshit.
yeah, that's right.
Thank
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
You have one too? I'm good. No, mine's good.
Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
special.
Yeah.
It was just the extra 6 that I made.
Now.
Yeah.
I made ones for them. I made.
I definitely didn't tell them that it was two-sided.
So did we have enough for everybody?
Yeah,
'Cause there's a
Lisa
good
didn't wanna
copy
let her
here.
Notes escape, because some of them might not be political.
Okay, the next one is the breakdown of all of the departments. So the departments every year are given the opportunity to kind of say what they'd like to see moving forward. So what you see for the general fund is all of the department needs moving forward for the CIP. Every year this changes, so it was important that when we look at this, we try to think of what happened last year. And I'm only saying that because I want to point out the city was gonna go out for a Kubota mower for the Parks Department in 21-22. And unfortunately, we didn't get the paperwork in time to submit the application. And so it's back on here. it's considered a new CIP. This does have a partial grant funding. If we apply for the grant with the USDA, it was just an unfortunate thing, so it's back on here instead of a completed item. But we have what we considered admin or citywide, which is the first group. The big one that you've heard me talk about is the citywide software. The one-page explanation that will come out for each of these items includes our updates. Where are we at with these projects? I don't want anyone to think that we put this together and then I put it up on that shelf and it collects dust bunnies, because it doesn't. It actually sits on my desk and I go through it with, oh, we need to get that done. We have already started working on the enterprise resource planning document, which is an ERP to go out for software. Not a new concept, but something that has been widely pushed by the Government Finance Officers Association, the Government Finance Office Association of Texas, the state of Texas. It is a document that basically says we want to go out for software. And then we have to provide everything we have as far as software and what we're looking for. So poor Marcy is waiting for me to dump everything on her. She's assisted with starting to get this project put into place. We started it and now we have to fill in that huge section. It won't be as hard as it is for other cities because we literally have departments. What is the software they use? Excel. What would they like? An actual functioning software. It's a little bit of research to see what options are out there, because you want it to be specific, especially when you're going out for specific needs. Today alone, we had issues with our billing software. It's a back and forth with them. I found out that to get full training for one person will cost us $2,160, and there's not an itemized list of what the training is. It's what they need. We need more than just a need. We need you to sit down and walk us through every step because something is not going correctly. So when we look at utility billing, it's not just the billing itself, it's the meter reading, it's the meter assets, it's adding a line specifically for handhelds if we want to go that route. There's just more to it than one side. It's also a general ledger. It's refunds, deposits, making sure we list it all. So we've already started working on that. As far as the next item is the security system.
Quick question on the
Yep.
software. Like you said, that can fulfill a lot of different departments. Is that something that we're going to pursue scalably where we're going to try one, or is there going to just be one immediate implementation where everyone has the carpet pulled out from under them?
Well,
Sink or swim.
so sink or swim is better. Let's all suffer together. Ideally, I would like it to be a one and done, only because having the software be able to train a group at once is a lot easier. Now, financially, it may not be manageable and it may not be smart. The 500 is a rough estimate. This was an estimate from 2020 when we initially were looking at this type of direction. The big thing with the ERP for me is to find a company that if we are going to departmentalize and do sections at a time, that they can cover all those departments. Because there is a great utility software. It is wonderful. I've seen demos. I love it. It's got an online portal for customers, but they don't connect to very many financial softwares. The key softwares, remember, I'm a finance person, is having everything come into that finance side. Because we have so much room for error when we manually are taking everything to put it into one. So the utility, because it is a big powerhouse for income, revenue, everything, I'd want it to automatically match with the finance. So the ERP will help give us that direction. Finding the software that can provide for everyone, and then kind of breaking down what can we.
And if that was scalable, do you think the two priorities would be accounting and then utilities?
Yes.
Does this bring in everything to include courts and city police?
At the estimate at the time. And that's really coming from one vendor who is considered, I call them the Cadillac. They're the big. Now Marfa just switched to them. Marfa's not happy.
With everything that the police department has, that's
So and
everything
he's
transferred?
gonna be able to do the terminology way better than I am, but not network. But because they use CopSync, it's having that bridge to connect to our software. And a lot of software companies already have those in place. So just because it's two different companies, doesn't mean that those two companies have come to an agreement that allows them to connect some way.
So Martha is not happy because.
So, they were using Assist completely for everything, accounts payable, like everything. It was their one own software. When the implementation started, they have, they like the software itself. It's that nobody has come out to help them. It's all on phone, it's all via Zoom. And sometimes people need the face-to-face. The last time I talked to Mandy Roan, they were getting better. They were learning it, but it was really hard at the beginning. That's the part that can kill us, is if we don't have that constant connection and having someone either physically here or easily accessible. It kind of will hinder our morale. It will make it harder for the staff because they're already frustrated. And then to, like you said, pull the carpet out from under them.
And then they don't want to come because we're so small.
So
I mean, there's probably a pretty penny attached to.
That's what I was gonna ask. So none of the training is
To-
included, no training at all is included in this cost?
that included 100 hours.
Typically, you go to them. It's a big system. They don't come to you because
Right.
they've got training rooms that are set up. So, they could come here, but they could do a much better job of training those you send.
100
But-
hours doesn't seem much though, when you're talking about courts, you're
It's
talking
not.
about police department, you're
It's
talking
not.
about billing and.
It's not. But
No, it's-
it's integration has been the problem for 40 years. And every time one of the parties does a major update, everything breaks. Just think about on your phone. If you do an update on your BIOS on your phone, you have to go update a whole bunch of your apps because they no longer work because you upgraded.
Or you lose all your contacts.
Yeah, so this is a problem that's been around for 40 or 50 years since they got away from stone tablets and chisels.
The good old days.
Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like it makes sense to go spend some time with the folks at Martha to really understand what they did, what they learned, so we become informed buyers. I'm putting software systems in lots of countries, and when you're an informed buyer, life's a whole lot easier. You can also probably talk to the CAD because we put in the software on our chair over there to do all their property valuations automated using tablets to tie back in. Completely got rid of the detail. So both of those.
So Mandy is more than welcome me to come over there. I'm waiting for them to go through their frustration a little bit first.
It's smart.
Yeah.
I hate to be like, what is that?
Let them learn, yeah. They would do all the deals. You come back.
But I'm glad that you brought that up as far as the tablets and all that, because one of the things this ERP has is not only what we have, but what we want. And so we would like to take our resources and our employees and put that tablet in their hands. So when they're doing work orders,
Yep.
they're putting them in right there and hitting submit. They're not filling it out by hand, putting it in their truck, waiting for us to call them because they haven't turned it in. It's still pending. It's been 2 months. We're hoping it alleviates some of the frustration just with what we're dealing with now. So the tablets would be another item that we would be discussing. Utilities on the water side currently does have several iPads, so they're already a step ahead if we were to make that change. So we are excited that this ERP really is going to give us a direction. The security system. So gotta love vendors. And I apologize if you guys don't want to do item by item, we don't have to. These are big ones for me. The city in 16, 17, put in. So in light of what happened with Zuzu Burke, the city put in security cameras, not only in our buildings, but that are directed specifically for these one-ways. To help with traffic, for incidents like what happened with Miss Burke. The positive side of this is everyone has grown to enjoy them, especially as an employee. But now everyone wants one. That includes our animal control shelter. It would be helpful for them. They have no security currently. The visitor center is on their own security system, kind of like the Ring doorbell. It does tie back to the PD, but it's a whole different software, whole different group. We do have ones at the airport, but they currently aren't working. The pool has actually saved the pool from lawsuits, where we have them aimed at the pool specifically for safety and complaints. So in looking at the security system, there's been several companies who reached out to the city of Alpine, kind of done some demos, sent us a few cameras to try out. Unfortunately, it is an expense. We're actually thinking it might be a little bit more than 175,000 to outfit the whole city. That is just the initial cost. Depending on the direction we would go with security. There could be a monthly or yearly fee in order to keep the data, the cloud basically. And so those are things we're looking at. But they have been very useful. I know there are times when I'm here late at night that I kind of enjoy knowing that if something happens, it's on camera. The other item under the citywide, this is a project that we actually tried to go out for in 2020, the hazard mitigation planning. This is the BRIC grant that would provide some federal funding to help us improve our flood plan, our maps, our code enforcement ordinances. We did not get it awarded, but this one is, we can apply for it every year. So this one is in the budget. There's no specific date set for it. Go ahead, Marcy.
We can apply for it anytime it comes up. There's no restrictions on that, but for the last couple of years after 2020, the federal government, for I don't know why, pulled it as a program. They did not offer it, or they started to offer it
And then they
pulled
pull it
back.
out.
So if this is something that the city, wants to do, we need to be prepared whenever they actually say go and mean go. I just wanted to add that.
Well, no, and this goes to not only that, but putting the money aside in the reserves.
Yes.
So that we build those back up so that we can move forward with that 1 year, all of a sudden it becomes open.
Quick question on the security systems. Those cameras, are they different systems or are they all the same system? Because y'all have multiple locations. Is it all the same vendor?
So that's not really a vendor. We purchase them through BBT and they currently all go through, I guess, their network to our police department. And then the other ones are kind of like your Ring doorbell and they go
Gotcha.
straight to the,
So there is a one management for most of them
yes.
through the.
Now, those, are they live or do they actually record or you just get the live?
No, they're live. They're.
So if you want to
24/7.
go back, there is no recording.
We can only go back 30 days.
I'm not too sure.
Some of them, I know Heather's have a specific time frame that how far back you can go. She does have several motion activated ones, so as people move, they'll turn on. The ones that we have on these are 24/7, and I think it's about 30 or 60 days.
And on the hazard mitigation, what are the benefits of actually having that? The floodplain.
So the benefits of a flood plan.
Yeah.
Marcy, do you want to
Interested.
explain this one?
No.
So this is a planning document. This would help us really kind of understand how our city floods. It would provide guidance on how we do streets and how do we target those areas with rebuilding drainage infrastructure. It does have a component with insurance. Are you paying flood insurance because of where your house is located? That's only a portion of this plan with the hazard mitigation. It also includes updating all of our code ordinances,
Codes, mainly code,
um,
yeah, building codes and ordinance.
to make sure that everything's compliant. There was one more piece. Do you remember what it was?
It was, well, we had added like a historical properties component to it. That had been a recommendation. Because the city does have on, like the Sunshine House, and those are treated separately, but we don't really have an asset list necessarily. So it had that element to it as well. It was codes, it was mapping, which again is where truthfully, we'll see these and I might point them out as we move forward, but the GIS that meant that we've already gone over would be helpful in moving forward a lot of these projects. If we try to catalog it.
Marcy wouldn't have to use Google Maps anymore.
Yes.
Doesn't know where I live.
So The rest of the items, you'll notice, several generators, lots of heavy equipment. The generators, the one coming up under the PD is a priority one. We are still working with the county to see if we can't get something moving forward. Otherwise, we'll have to actively pursue getting that taken care of this next fiscal
How
year.
big is it? What size?
I can't tell off the top of my head. All of that data is on my desk.
Because I just, 65 kW generators run about 25,000.
So when I talked to Daryl and we put the 100,000, because you're absolutely correct. We put the higher amount because we're used to the OFs. It is in an enclosed area. It's removing the one that's there, it's putting in a new one, making sure the wiring. That building does not have the best electrical wiring. So we kind of looked at it, not just the generator, but everything that could go wrong with it. We don't think we'll spend close to that. The animal shelter would also like a generator. This is important when you think long-term care of the animals. That freeze did hurt them a little bit, without having the heating element, and the air conditioning element, everything goes out. And also their freezer went out, and that's where they keep the animals waiting to go for, yeah. So Jennifer, just please, you'll notice hers is a little bit lower. They do have a newer building, and she is not requesting the same size.
These kinds of big equipment, like especially generators, do we put them on a preventive maintenance schedule with the vendor or with some third party? Because they really need to be
That is an
maintained.
excellent question. And I want to tell you that we do now.
Okay.
The only real big generators that have ever been on a preventative plan, didn't start until 18. Yeah. Yeah, are the wastewater treatment plant and it's another one with the water department, but I think it's their mobile one because they have two, and Caterpillar actually comes twice a year and maintains them. I have instructed our current department, so you're aware, because the one thing that we always forget to do is that random turn it on, make sure it works. Is there oil? Because when you don't need it, out of sight, out of mind. So they are now required to do the basic every month checks that Caterpillar has recommended.
Okay, most modern equipment has Wi-Fi and self-diagnostics. It'll tell you all of that until it stops working.
We don't have that new generator. These are a lot older. And we're lucky because we haven't put the hours on them. Because we wouldn't have to. But the wastewater treatment plant spill that happened earlier this year, that was because the generator didn't kick back on. So making sure the maintenance is kept up.
So what kind of fuel do they run on?
Diesel.
Diesel?
Yes, and the wastewater treatment plant does have a above ground little diesel tank specifically to help keep. And then we do have one at the yard as well that is utilized for stuff like that.
Diesel degrades. You can't store diesel for forever.
Oh, no,
So
we
when
don't.
you-
We go through it.
Okay.
No, I get those bills.
I don't see the FEMA grant on for utilities for the generators. Would that go under CIP? or-
It's never been on the CIPs. Good point. Thank you, Marcy. So the rest are kind of, the usual that we go through every year. The street, this one we will need to talk about. Last year, when we did the CIP for the street department, we looked at specifically bringing it back in, which meant buying the additional equipment to pave in-house. I still think that's a good idea in the long run. Definitely not a good idea this coming fiscal year, which means we will probably need to outsource it. I'm going to leave it in the CIP because I think it's important as we move forward with the city, that it's something we do consider. It is easier to outsource the paving currently, but I do believe that at some point it would be more beneficial to bring it back in. Because then we're not dependent and waiting for someone else.
And employee retention is not very good right now, and we're not able to fill the positions that need to be filled, so
It is
I
the
mean, not
largest
just that,
number,
we're just not ready. We don't have people for this.
which is why it's just gonna sit where it's at, and hopefully we can build that department. Moving to the next one, Marcy did mention the generator grant. This one actually came out of everything that happened with the freeze and life in general. The city did apply for generators for the well builds, to have as additional backup if we were to lose power or if we were to have that storm that was to come through. This will get added to the current active ones because it is still current and active. We are not off the list yet. It has been a very, we're in a year now?
For the year. And they still have more questions for us and they retracted the questions, but they're gonna come back with different questions. But we're still in the running. We have not been crossed off the list yet.
So it's us
And for
and,
small communities to still be in this big FEMA pool is pretty darn good.
and it's us in Jeff Davis County.
It's the IFD, actually.
Of the IFD. So we're really excited because we still have a chance.
Yep.
This falls under current and active, but this is when we had the engineers do a study on the generators and what we would need to do to be able to sustain during a storm. And so we use that to apply for the application. There is a match to it, which we actually have already set aside in reserves. So there's no coming up with that money. It's just waiting for FEMA to say yes, no, or we're gonna give you part, but not all. We've provided them as much as possible. I know when we got this last email, I panicked and said, give up, because everything they were asking, I was just like, we don't have it. So I'm glad that they
And I talked
retracted.
her down off that cliff.
So you'll notice that the wastewater treatment plant is one of the items up there. That amount I do need to adjust based off of the current, it's 4 million, it's over 4 million at this point, with the update of the 5.6. The infrastructure location replacement, this is the first big part of not only the lead and copper. This has been in place last fiscal year and this fiscal year. It also ties back to our strategic plan in regards to replacement of water lines. We did apply for a project information, which is a PIP, project information form. Our engineer, it's free. They submitted on our behalf. Texas Water Development Board has been given a bucket of money for lead and copper. Of course, they don't give it to us for free, but it could reduce our costs long-term. So we have applied for this project. It would be kind of a grant loan, low interest, but they would come in and help us put something in place to move forward with the infrastructure.
Is that just for gas, Megan?
No, that is for water.
Is that the unmandated,
Yes.
the unfunded mandate, right? So I had a question. Supposed to change them from lead and copper to whatever,
So PVC,
okay, how are they gonna know?
we have to tell them.
Just curious.
So that is step one that is due October of this year, is to provide them with basically an inventory asset list of everything we have on city and customer side.
So if we have steel pipes, we don't have to worry.
We have to tell them that it's still, because I think that's the next thing when come down
All right, so we have, just replace them on PVC is what they're called, right?
currently. Doesn't mean in a year they'll change them.
I got you.
Megan, we've been talking at council meetings about annexing the apartments.
Yes.
So where would that be? Because if we annex them, the water and wastewater is on us, isn't it?
No, so they're tying into our existing lines. All of that expansion is on them.
Okay. So it's not in this budget.
But we didn't have the capacity to work.
Be able to supply water and pay for wastewater, yes.
One that was been on here for a couple years now is the East Side Sewer Extension. I know Rick and I have briefly discussed one of the possible legislative laws coming down. It is at a halt. It did not make it to the next
I
steps.
watched that.
I wait for the next little green check marks. And of course, they have recessed. Doesn't mean we won't have a session 2 and 3. They've already started working on those.
Think you're gonna call them.
Yes, yes. But he's calling it specifically for taxes and for education. So we think this one will die completely. there was an amendment made to it that they would have to complain. They would have to file the petition before we, so. But it is on here because when we talk about expansion and we talk about economic development, everything from roughly Pizza Hut and Travel Lodge East are not on city sewer. Now they are in the city limits, but the service isn't being provided to them. So our engineers at the time did a study to see what it would cost the city to expand that. And please understand that when you see that 1.6 million, that is not a current estimate. And also understand that is bringing someone in. Our staff would not be able to do that. And I mean, that would, you'd want someone specifically that not being pulled away for work orders and other things. This would be providing that resource further east. But also when we think about expansion and development in the economy, we want to be able to provide those services as we expand. Currently, we do not provide services outside the city limits. But if a company was to come in, and even though they're building in the county, I'd still want us as a city to provide something, a service, because they're not gonna come and be put on a septic
Well,
tank.
it's like it's right there, you know?
We've got houses that are like that, Karen, but it's
I know.
so this is part of that planning, the moving forward, and knowing the direction we want to go. The other items on here are really kind of a maintenance, long-term thing, manholes, that's replacing the ones that are lower than the street. So
And you
that
got those rings, right?
it would have to have the rings.
Yeah.
The Soul Rock storage tanks, that one is specifically set for 2025. That's just to go in and clean them up. There was the battle back and forth between does Soul Rock own them, does the city own them? TCQ says, take care of it. So the city is primarily responsible.
And that's
So
not something we can recoup from Soros or maintenance fee or something.
I've got a long list of things I want them to pay for right now. It's definitely a discussion in the future. Because this is until 2025.
On the east side sewer extension, is the issue, if there was infrastructure there, do you think there would be demand by the landowners to actually expand that out? Is that something that's halting that, or do you think even if there was good infrastructure, they wouldn't be interested in developing?
That's actually a really good question. I think people would be willing to develop if they knew they had easy access to services. I don't know property ownership of the areas of land. But I think if I owned a property that I knew I could easily get someone to invest in and they had those services, it's a win-win.
Okay, so we would recruit, if that gets developed, we would recruit that sum through property values and everything else, taxes ad valorem, all the other.
If they annex to the city.
Okay.
So right now, the people who don't have, this is to address the people who don't have sewer. They're already in the city and they're not benefiting from that at all.
Yeah, and there's so many of them have septic out there.
And so they are in city limits or they're?
Yes,
They are.
they are.
So we get the benefit of the taxes. But we didn't put the infrastructure in. Because when all they got annexed, like a number of annexes happened years ago, was not the good planning to make sure all that got sorted out. Right.
So if we expanded it, gave them the service, anyone coming in on the outskirts would be able to take advantage of it as well, and we could continue to expand.
To put it, if the hotels are out there, they would have an economic incentive to add the wastewater because right now a hotel produces 200 gallons per occupied day.
So both hotels out there already have it. And actually Holiday Inn has a huge invested interest because they paid for the lift station to ensure they had the access.
Do we use that lift station?
We do, that's my trouble.
And do we pay them? Do we?
They paid us for it and it's our property now.
Oh, okay, it's okay, I see.
Yeah, there are two lift stations over there, one for the hotel and the other by the tracks.
Do you know where they're at?
Sorry.
Do you know where they're at? You know, you're driving down Old Marathon Road and.
Okay.
You'll see it.
And if you see water around them, please call me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I laugh, but it has happened. Holiday Inn paid specifically to get that. That's one of the projects for the future to discuss. Engineers have suggested that we don't even need it. that we should reinvest into a gravity fed system like it was designed.
Because the challenge Paresh has is when it doesn't work, he floods out first floor.
Yep.
And it's kind of an ugly mess.
So he has a very invested interest.
Yeah.
Moving on to the airport, these are kind of big projects coming forward, but you'll notice that TxDOT Aviation is tied to 3 of them. These are all projects that we've requested on behalf of the city, and they have them in their queue. But it's also dependent on this. So money gets moved around if it's available, if it's not available. So it's kind of a hit and miss when we get them. The AWAS was scheduled for current, but we changed the layout plan so that we could get that taken care of, so that we could actually plan the airport before we move the AWAS.
Yep.
And, didn't want to move it and then say, oh, we messed up. The Kubota that they're asking for is actually a Kubota / tug. That's to assist with some of their day-to-day operations. And covered parking, if you've ever been out to the airport, there is a specific area that everyone likes to park. The idea is to make it more comfortable for people who actually come in and out of the airport, that they have a little covered parking to protect their vehicles. When you next go around, when we look at the actual page by page items that will go out to everyone, it's Abel's vehicle that's parked there. But it's one of those amenities that we want to start building up with our airport. Tourism.
Wait, Megan, I'm sorry. Can we go back? I just want to point out one thing under the utilities department again, under the automated metering system that has a pretty large price tag attached to it. It for potential funding source, it also has the ARPA funds. But I think it's important to note that if we use, the federal funds for that, then we wouldn't have any to go towards the water and wastewater treatment plant. So it's not an endless supply of ARPA funds. These are potential funding.
And that can be updated. At the time, that was an option. We haven't allocated the second half. But if we do get that community grants project, I would ask the city to apply the whole amount.
Towards the wastewater treatment.
Yes. to the
Yes.
wastewater.
We have a lot of
Towards
funds set
the
aside for all these
system.
projects. Will you be providing us with a balance on the reserve fund, taking into account all of this money that's set aside for something else?
And some of these have already had money allocated, some of them haven't, so yes, we'll discuss that. The visitor center, most of their updates or their CIPs is actual investing back into the building itself. It's updating the windows, walls, interior layout, and floors, roof and ceiling. For those of you who don't know, the visitor center is an old bunker from the Marfa Airfield. I was gonna say Army. It was moved over here with the chamber at one point. It is a city-owned building. So it's just continuing the maintenance to make sure we can get that up and running 100%. Part of it was for this year, but we are going to hold off and try to do it all next year. This is a separate pot of money. They do have money not only set aside in the reserves, but they do have a fund balance that could move forward with this.
And hot funds cannot be used for anything like that.
No, they can for the visitor center.
So this is, that's what this is coming from?
Yes, specifically the hot funds.
How much hot funds do we have?
Currently,
I mean, I can't remember what the amount is that we bring in.
we've been bringing in between 675 to 750,000.
These numbers that you've put out here, are these numbers that Alpine is contributing and matching the hot funds, or?
No, these are
so
solely hot funds.
these are wholly hot funds, so these are really not part of the city's budget, are they?
Yes, as a whole, they are. They're a separate fund that we budget for.
How much did we spend on the visitor center in the most recent pavilion and bathrooms and stuff that they did?
191,000. 200 something thousand. That was,
Seems like we're spending an awful lot of money on the visitor center, and I wonder, basically half of our annual income from hot funds. I wonder if we get, that's the best investment of that money.
What is
No question.
It is, it's a good question. So the visitor center updates, 45,000, what is that for?
That is for new windows and the walls around it. So they do have a window issue right now.
But I
Oh,
guess,
no,
it-
no, no, I'm talking about further down the list where it says just visitor center updates. 2024, 2025, and then there's 45,000.
That is for updating the interior of the building to include a child area, to include like a bulletin board type area. It's improvements inside the building.
but
And I
since,
have more specifics I can pull.
but since they're hot funds, it would be good to know that they can't be used somewhere else though, right?
Correct.
So even if it's a lot, it's looks like a lot of money, it's not money we could say, well, we could use somewhere else.
Oh, you could. Hot funds are used to promote tourism.
So
Well,
you're
yes,
saying we
ma'am.
could use the money for festivals or something, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, currently, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we fund most everything that comes up?
No.
No, we don't.
Some of it.
We just got the applications for this year and I'm just like.
And I guess I'm a little bit, I'm doing some of that, and this is just my personal opinion. I think that funding some of these festivities should be a way of getting them started. But I personally feel that shouldn't there come a time when there should be self-sufficient?
If they can't be self-sustaining, they don't deserve to exist.
Right, and we are funding some of these that it has been year after year after year after year. So I myself am a little reluctant at throwing a little bit more money if they're not able to get to that point.
And if we were private sector, they would have already been gone. let
Yes.
loose, Because private sector doesn't spend good money after bad.
Right, so I'd rather spend it on
Huge
this
amount
than,
of money. I just think, if the purpose of hot funds is to promote tourism and heads in bed, then is this the highest in bed? And it could be that it is, I just want.
I just heard today, I think, that the economy of Alpine, 25% of our economic growth or economy,
yeah.
jobs and stuff comes from tourism. So that's a pretty big part of our city's survival. So, I promote tourism. I'm all about tourism.
it is, and I think that's great. But there are some of these that we're funding that are not bringing in a lot of,
Festivals though, right?
Art Walk, is that one that keeps getting?
some of them don't bring in too many people from out of town.
I agree.
There are some that we're still funding that I wish we would fund the ones that are bringing in the people.
Or and try some new ones.
Right, exactly. Instead of funding the ones that we keep over and over again. And we have found that they're really not bringing in.
I agree. I just think, it's worth a look. And I don't know the answer
Yeah.
to most of those questions.
I can make a bulletin book for the branch.
Well, I think. I don't have the detailed list in front of me. I'm providing the summary. Ideally, most of this really is maintenance of the building. The building is old and I can tell you right now, the city did not maintain it for 20 years.
Like I say, it's like the wastewater. It hadn't been maintained for 42 years, so it kind of piles up.
As a visitor, if this is the first place you go to, you don't want the torn apart flooring, the windows with we think are termites around it. You want it to be a nice place. These would be basically one-time expenses. And then it would just be regular maintenance. We wouldn't have to be putting in new windows every other year. It would be a one and done.
And Heather is very good at having a lot of activities there. I mean, she gets a lot of use of the building and brings a lot of people to it. And a lot, yes, ma'am, quite a bit. So
Yes.
I think.
And we're not adding them back.
'Cause that's what the tourists complain about. Not enough bathrooms.
And in poor tourists, it's getting them to move our direction for those restrooms and not the ones that are not up clean. I have gotten some complaints on stripes, as the restrooms are not clean. I don't know if they're health and safety either. But no, we're not currently adding more bathrooms. We are landlocked with that building. So there's really no expansion of that area. But if we can get tourists to come to that area for the bathrooms, that's it. Just so everyone's fully aware, the bathrooms are currently being locked at night. They were supposed to be open 24/7, but we had a few incidences with drug paraphernalia and drugs. And so we're kind of trying to deter the locals to away from that area so that we can address it.
What time they lock up?
So the officer who goes on shift at 11,
11 at night, okay, that's right.
Yes, yeah.
and then when they get there first thing in the morning, they turn them back on. It's not every night that they're being locked. It depends on if the officer coming on at 11 is getting a break or if he's coming straight into an issue. But we are monitoring that because even though we do have locals that use them, my big concern is I would hate for a tourist with kids or someone to come in and have needles and something go wrong.
Our cameras pointed in that area.
They are pointed in that area.
Have we had any issues, or I know we've had a few, but has it gotten out of hand with homeless people's in there too?
No, I know Daryl has done a fantastic job with trying to relocate the homeless into actual homes, even if it's temporary. And I believe a couple of them keep getting arrested, so.
I believe most of the people in the camp, cemetery were gone.
Yes,
They took quite a bit of trash to the recycling center, got rid of it.
the sheriff's
So-
department and the PD have been
Yes.
working to clean that up.
Megan, where would the downtown be?
That would go in Coconut Park. So that is one of those basically kiosks that has the big bulletin boards that are covered in poly or glass and has, little flyer slots so that as we direct people to the park, they get more information. The other side to that, putting that kiosk would hopefully entice people to come towards Coconut for the night sky, and projects that go on.
So collaboration, I think we talk about this at the ABA, where you're doing things to promote tourism, but the Historic Association is also doing things, and we're looking at fundraising opportunities. We need to make sure that we're coordinating with one another so that we're not competing for some of the same grants, some of the same opportunities.
So the Historic Society does apply for grant funding through the HOT fund.
Well, but they're thinking about going out for other grant money.
A lot of what they apply for, some of the city can't.
Yeah, we can progress.
And the benefit of having Mr. Ruggia is he is so involved that he keeps track of what everyone's doing, so that we try to keep on the same page.
I just don't
Not
want us-
easy.
Yeah, and I just don't want us competing for the same thing.
No, as the city, we mostly compete with Brewster County and the other cities. We usually don't typically compete with nonprofits and local, or community-based. The gas department, very simple. So he is looking at replacing his air conditioner, upgrading that. It has been at least 11 years. I don't know how long they've been in that building, to be honest, but it's original to the building. Building updates just includes putting in a rolling door, putting in sides to their awning to protect their equipment. They're just basic everyday needs. One thing he does want to move forward with and focus on for this upcoming fiscal year and part of the CIP is phasing out the meters, the automated meters. And talking with Mr. Guzman, the benefit to this one for them, and I know the water department currently has it on their CIP as well, is Fort Davis. So we do have to send employees to Fort Davis because we do own that gas system. Having an automated system would assist with some of that maintenance, getting employees over there, not having to get them over there. So he's looking at phase 1 of Fort Davis only. It does have the smaller accounts. There are a handful of business accounts as well. He is going to go back and look at what it would cost to outfit Fort Davis. And ideally, I've asked him to look at the full picture. Are you putting it in? Are you being trained to put it in? How are you maintaining it? Are we going to focus on just residential first? Are we going to focus on businesses? Can we do them both at once? So he has a homework list, and he'll be coming back with some updates on that for the actual budget part. The amount that's budgeted is what he was quoted a year ago in regards to outfitting the city of Alpine and Fort Davis. So we're gonna look at phasing it out, put it in his operating budget, and that would reduce some of the issues with employees in the back and forth. And it would put them all on an automated system, making it easier for customers as well.
On for the automated ones, water and gas, if we so I'm sure we're not recouping 100% of the use right now. In your mind, you have an estimate of what we're not recouping, like 80%, meters aren't read or anything else?
I don't want to say this. I think it's less than 80%.
Okay, so automating it would provide some revenue. growth.
Automating it would help. I'm not worried on the gas side. Gas is probably at a good 90-95% because they have been in a maintenance method for years. On the water side, I truly believe we are losing a lot of water. And one of the items coming down the road for council and for the public to be aware is, as a city, it's not the city who just wastes water. When we did a investigation of all of our water leaks, parks, everything that we utilize water for, the big side of that was the customers watering and going down the street. The water leaks that don't get fixed. If you live on the south side and you watch from Avenue F, it came down, cut across the side street and went all the way down to Murphy to the street. That was a customer side leak. Now, we are by law allowed to cut them off, but at the same time, it's that compromise with they have children, you know, they can't get a plumber on a Sunday, and it's working with them. I really believe on the water side, putting in the automated meters would help because it would also initiate the replacement of old meters. We lose on old meters. I love it when customers come in and say, oh, you've misread my meter. I want a meter test. I want you to replace my meter, and their meter is 12 years old. And we say, we'll do that for you. We put it in and the next month their meter readings are higher because now it's reading the full amount. It's not reading that every other drop. It is literally reading everything that runs through the meter because it's a new meter. So I think it would come hand in hand. Automated meters, if you go back and you look at all the different cities who are moving this direction, it really is a hit and miss. Is it return of investment? Is it worth it? I look at it as if I can get an automated meter and I can get it into a customer portal with a great software system, and I can look at my meter every day to know when I flushed my toilet. I think our customers who really want to see why their bills are so high can just see those trends. It's hard with we're doing a great job, by the way. I'm giving Drew 100% credit here. We have done great with getting every meter read every month. But that is literally 11 people instead of just hitting a radio and driving around town fast.
So that would free up their labor.
Yes.
And then that would be, I'm assuming those are non-proprietary, so they would work with any software you choose to move forward with.
Maybe.
They have a system like that in Midland and they walk along. So they don't zip around in a car. It's not that fast, but it's RFID read. So they walk around long and they look like they've
With a
got
wand.
a cane. You know, it's a white cane, and then it just collects all the data and it's automated. So it's recording it all. I don't know if it's cellular or Wi-Fi connected or if they have to go back and do a download. But I know on our street, they just walk down the street and walk up the other side and every meter's read.
Send us a bill.
So there still would require some labor to do the walkthroughs.
It's usually one, or if we had a great group of walkers in Alpine who wanted to make a little extra cash, we could just have them just take their strolls. If you paid me to walk, I would do it for you.
Start a walking club.
Yeah.
The new automated electric meters do 100% self-reporting, so.
So, and you bring up a valid point with if it's radio frequency, if it's cell phone, the cell phones tend to be more, you don't go out there. It automatically sends those signals every so many minutes.
So that's more.
It is more, but it's also understanding the city of Alpine, and what works best. I don't know about y'all, but our cell system isn't exactly the best reliant system.
So the thing about that is find a system that actually uses text messages instead of data. Data plans are expensive. Text plans are 1/10 of the cost. So try to find someone that's not using data, that's using all the excess bandwidth by sending a text. It's the same result.
Good to know. So back to your question, I think we're losing more. The next section, Marcy, was so, oh, we can go. I just need a sweater. No, sorry. She pointed out that I need to change this up a little bit for you guys. I thought it was important as we complete things that we keep it visible, that people can see what we have done over the past several years. I don't think this is something that we need to keep for 10 years worth of information, but at least a couple. But I do need to break it out a little bit different, to indicate what's been completed. It's an actual completed project, purchase, done, we're good to go. And then we have what I call postponed or on hold. These are items that we're not moving forward with at the time, either because departmental needs don't meet what we're asking. For example, the license plate reader. That is an item that Chief Lasoya would like to get into place, but under his current capacity, it's not something that would benefit him. So he wants to hold off on moving forward with that type of a project. The holding cells. The city has talked about it for several years about putting some type of holding facility within the police department, so that when they have that midnight run or that 2 a.m., they're not having to go to the jail. They can actually take care of things right then and there, hold the individual. That one is currently on hold. For the police department, most of his completed. I will need to go in and I put the specific grant I think you guys should be aware of. They get a lot of grant funding. Law enforcement is one of the highest grant funded organizations, and their border security is coming down with even more money right now. So that's important to know. I have a couple items on here that in your mind, you may be like, well, is it completed or is it not? So the backhoe for the utilities department, we are currently in the process of purchasing, but they don't want a backhoe. After talking to the department and actually sitting down with the employees and what they need to do their job, they would prefer to have a walk behind trencher that would allow them to cut more of a specific path for their fixes and their utilities and taps and everything else. They like the idea of a backhoe because at the time it was just something, well, if we had another one, we could have 2 crews. But after utilizing the gas departments and fully understanding their responsibilities within the department, that would make their job easier. It actually is cleaner instead of using a backhoe to rip up the work. So we're excited to get that taken care of this year, which is why it's listed as completed, because we will have it purchased by the end of the year. The aerator and bar screen has been completed. This one started several years ago. It was completed this fiscal year. This was the replacement and addition of 2 fully functional aerators. Since 2013, the city's operated off of one. This is a 24/7 stirring the pot, literally, which was not benefiting the wastewater treatment plant and making the jobs of the employees harder. That has been completed and both are up and running. The bar screen was completed first. This is an automated bar screen. More information than you probably ever want to know. But the very first thing that comes through that plant, all of that solid waste goes through a bar screen and collects the solids. Thank you.
Lovely.
It's interesting what comes through: baseballs, golf balls, teddy bears, prisoner uniforms, actual money. Does not degrade in the system as it has moved to the plant. Currently, or prior, the employees were having to manually lift it out into the trash. Now this actually does it for them. And so
That money's not a $10,000 bill. I'm not going for it.
I learned my lesson the first visit. They had a $50 sitting on a rock, and I was like, oh, I want, and they're like, don't touch it. They had just pulled it out. They bleach it and left it there to dry. More power to them. But that project is also completed. As far as the airport, it's important to note that the lighting project is listed as completed because it will be completed by the end of this fiscal year. So we did have that added. And then the 2 prior from the prior fiscal year, but in keeping them for transparency here. The next was the visitor center. The restrooms in the pavilion have been completed. So the outdoor portable stage is on postpone. It was an item that Chris and Heather had talked about as having like an event stage for people to use. Because the pavilion has been put in place and people are utilizing that more and more, it may be permanently postponed and we'll take it off. But currently we're waiting to see.
You permanently postpone the splash pad.
You saw how I skipped over that.
Yes. Anybody in this room really want a splash pad?
No. Not unless we can use the effluent.
No, we have to produce affluent first. The splash pad, the city has allocated currently money towards it, and the Friends of the Big Bend Parks is raising the rest of it. It has been postponed. I have talked to TK with the Friends of the Big Bend Parks. I understand the conflict with residents and council, and do we need it and do we not need it? It is a big part of quality of life for some families. It has not been removed until we truly understand the direction we want to go with that.
This is the desert.
I know. The last department is the gas department, and so they have updated and completed the bay coverage. They've purchased the trailer. And this year they will have put in, thanks to council's approval of the emergency purchase, a new rectifier on fighting.
So, a couple of questions and then I got a brother, but see up here where City of Alpine total is 12 million.
So that is for every department in fund. That is the city as a whole.
And you say, but that's also just the capital, right?
Yes. So, and it will break out a little bit differently when I update to show what Alpine is responsible for and what we may possibly get in grant funding. So that number will change.
But again, that's capital. That doesn't include administrative, payroll, salaries, all of that. And then my next question is, and again, it'd be a ballpark, but what do you estimate our income is going to be during this same period?
We have a whole set of series we're going through, so.
Yeah.
We have 4 sessions. She just
Okay,
said
4
that.
sessions. Okay. All right.
I know we're gonna cover everything. Instead of doing it in 1 or 2 budgets, I've broken it down so everyone can see them all.
Wait, so we get to do this again, like drinking from.
At
a
least
fire
6
hose.
times this year.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. God bless you all. I mean, Jesus, thank you so much.
Well, make
Where would we
sure,
be without you?
make sure before you leave, the next section is on the strategic plan.
Yeah. so-
And it is kind of outlined. This is just the start. This is the meat and potatoes. There's a whole nother part of this that when it's presented as a whole, we'll kind of go through the process of what we've done, the town halls, the strengths and weaknesses. This is kind of the, what are we gonna do kind of side of it. I'm giving Marcy all the credit because he's trying to take my brain and take everything the public has said and put it on paper. My brain doesn't always function for her the way she wants it to. So I think she's done a great job. A lot of these can be checked off already. As we went through the strategic plan and when we were working with the community, we weren't stopping. As knowing where the city was headed and our issues, we went ahead and started taking, the action. We had the evaluation study done. Council approved that. It's getting and updating estimates. We've had that taken care of. So we've had a lot of these addressed, but we're not done. This is just kind of a step 1. We can add more to it. This is only the first part, infrastructure on the strategic planning, the wastewater, water and street. When we talk about employees at the next meeting, there is a strategic plan process as well for them. I didn't combine them because trying to not, mix everything up. But this one, I really would like everyone to kind of look it over and have, a good conversation about this. Wastewater. We all know it starts with the wastewater treatment plan. So we've actively started moving that direction with applying for grants. And you can send me notes in your email.
Yeah, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And I agree
you.
with
Thank you.
Rick. I've done huge budgets and there's going to be a lot of this that's going to be below the cut line.
That's anticipated.
Yeah. Jeez,
So the first goal, of course, is the wastewater treatment plant. It's to address the critical components of the city of Alpine's wastewater treatment plant to ensure compliance with TCEQ. The big thing with that is we have repeatedly gone under enforcement. We do typically either pay or come out of it. We currently have had an inspection within the past year. We have not gone into enforcement, but there was a laundry list of fixes. And so we've been trying to go through that laundry list for a year. Haven't come up with the final solution from TCQ if we're gonna move that direction or not. We're not poking the bear. We're gonna wait for them to basically come back. We're not gonna, hey, where are we at? What's going on? Are you can go after us?
In
Um,
the last year, how much have you paid in code violations?
None, not for TCQ.
Okay, any in the last 3 years? Ish.
14, no, I don't want to throw a number out there and be wrong. I know we did get a couple fines for licensing issues, and there was a cost fair one, and it was a couple thousand.
Nothing too big.
No, the last big one was in 18-19, and I believe we paid 42 altogether.
Yeah.
So there's a let me go back on step on that so you understand, Darren. We don't always have to pay a fine. So when we go into enforcement, they basically tell us either you can pay this or you can request a project, something to fix the plant to kind of balance out the enforcement. We've always tried to fix the problem. The years that we haven't, we've paid the fine. And sometimes, you know, councils and city managers will look at that, you know, just write the check and let's move on. But that hurts us if we don't keep trying to fix the problem. It's happened, it will continue to happen. Every city deals with it. We are no different than anyone else. But we've been lucky that we've been able to do the little projects to fix it, or to come up with a solution, even if it's temporary, to get out of the enforcement. So the first one is basically kind of what we've talked about with every meeting, is just the data, the evaluating, what are our priorities and what are our needs, and how do we get there? So we've done the wastewater evaluation, we've gone cost estimates, understanding the sequence of any of the priority recommended priority recommendations. So this goes back to when we look at that evaluation, it is a phased project. Which one do we want to complete first? It will be really dependent on if we get the grant funding. If they're gonna give us it all, then we're gonna just do it all. But if they're gonna give us a portion of it, what portion do we want to actually complete?
When do we know if we get that community action grant?
We don't know. We're hoping June.
This month?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah, it's June 1st.
I have
We're
sent
hoping
out
that-
several emails and not gotten any response. Legislation is in session, and I know Congressman Gonzalez is busy. I am very hopeful. Amy is better than that.
Yes. Have you been out to the wastewater treatment plant? I had the blessing of taking a tour yesterday. We need help. We do. We have 2 employees and they work very hard.
And then the last one is something we've advertised. I just can't get people to want to work out there.
I know. Imagine that.
The last section is the implementation of a daily, monthly, quarterly maintenance log. So going back and visiting with the current staff and just the 10 years, 11 years I've been here, and listening and emails and really just a lot of rabbit holes, we keep the required list. The required TCEQ boxes are checked. We don't keep the, did you go to the lift station and verify that it's not about to overflow? Did you go to the generator and make sure that there's oil, so if we lose power, it's not gonna shut down, it's gonna turn on? It's those maintenance logs that are important.
Verifying that the things are operational by, just going out and looking at them,
So it's
making sure your equipment's functioning.
the RAS pump has gone down, and my question is when was the last time we replaced it? And literally I don't know, because we don't have a log that shows pump replaced, Skinner called out. We don't have those data sets. And I think Alpine has tried year after year, just hasn't been successful. So hopefully, because we have shown great improvements with accountability and engagement and listening to the employees, it's like, hey, we need this to help you. You can't come in and tell me clarifier 1 doesn't work. And when I say, okay, well, what was the maintenance of it? Well, we tried to do something a couple weeks ago. It's okay, this is everything we've done for it. This is the last time Trinity came out and cleaned it. This is the last time. And it's having all of that data, because 1, that's how we move forward. It may not be an equipment issue. It may be an accountability issue of the maintenance, but we don't know. Right now, everything's just falling apart. And we can't, go one way or the other. We just know we have to fix it so that we can check that TCEQ box. So that was a big thing. And Andrew Devaney's been working on that with me. and getting them, and it's not just the wastewater treatment plant side, guys, it's water as well. When did we replace the well? When did we replace the pump? What about the lining? When was the last time? And you don't have that data set. One, we have all new employees.
It's the same when we can't fill the positions, they're stretched. They don't have time to.
But we're required to go test and read all these meters at the well sites. They have to go out there 7 days a week, so they're there. It's not hard to make that note.
This thing has a voice recorder. It has a camera. They can do that. Okay.
Well, and I think I've seen from software packages that will run those through that preventative maintenance, and then as they're going through that task list, it's gonna document it, so then city managers and stuff could look at that documentation,
And having that in the field where they can just mark it off and they're done.
the tablet.
So that right now, they have their cheat sheets and then they come back to the office and they sit there and they fill everything in and then they give it to someone else who comes in and take the steps away, make it one step. So we know that they're doing some type of maintenance. We just don't have a proper record of it. If they weren't doing maintenance, we'd have no water and there would be sewer everywhere. So we know it's happening. It's just better recording. We tried to just, everyone understands, we try to keep the objectives to a few because we don't want to overwhelm not only our staff, but the public and have all of these items that, aren't successful. We want to make this a successful plan. Evaluate funding options and opportunities to fix the priority wastewater treatment plant needs. These are simple, guys. We've already started on it, but it doesn't stop. We have to think long-term. We fix the current problems, but then we have to make sure funding down the road. How do we keep it growing? Currently, we're reducing our permit so that we're not meeting our levels at the wastewater treatment plant. We're never bringing in that quantity. So we're lowering it, which will benefit the city because it changes what we're required to have as far as permitting, as far as reporting. But at the same time, in 10 years, because we've done an awesome job and you guys have all planned for the future and you've put the infrastructure in place and you've made repairs and we have companies coming in and new housing coming in, that's another evaluation that has to come up. We have to plan for that to understand. And then how do we pay for it? Texas Water Development Board is the #1 source people go to for funding. It is typically a loan, but they are very low interest or no interest loans. But they're also the type of loan that if we go that direction, I don't want to go to them 1 year for $1 million and the next year for 500,000. I want to go with a plan. I want to go with, we're going to borrow these funds, but this is what we're going to do. And I want the public to hold us accountable. I want them to be able to say, you borrowed the money, show us what it did. That didn't happen in the past. That's why you hear about the people who are upset with the turning. And why didn't we do the no noise or thank you. The money was spent. It wasn't put towards that project. Marcy and I have both been working with all of the different funding sources on a regular basis, trying to look at different packages, trying to look at current versus future. This would be an ongoing project at all times that will constantly updating the council. Of course, create a viable backup funding plan to address the priority issues. In the near term, should known opportunities fall through. What's our next step? We don't get the grant. We don't get a loan. How do we move forward?
Really, if we don't get a grant, where's the money gonna come?
That's what we're really stuck there, guys.
We have to, and it's, you guys have to decide where the money's gonna come if we don't get the grant.
And that goes back up to the evaluation side as far as what piece do we do first. And our engineers have been wonderful with working with us to help us prioritize that. Our employees will tell you the whole thing is a priority one. They want it all fixed. They're out there Monday through Sunday.
Do the TWDB interest rates go up along as, federal rates have gone up and everything else over the last, say, 2 years? Do those go up higher or
No,
do they stay low?
they stay low. A lot of their funding is coming from the state. I can tell you right now, the big infrastructure bill that everyone keeps talking about for water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure that's coming down is gonna go and funnel through them. They're gonna get the bucket on behalf of the state. The state's gonna say, here's your $1 million, $2 million, billion. And we're gonna have to apply through them.
Do we know what low cost is? What a low interest rate is?
You're looking at an average between 3% and 4%. But they also have no interest rate loan. We currently have one no interest rate loan. The second goal, of course, is water infrastructure. The first objective being obviously data. What do we have? Create a survey for water account holders to submit, because we are required by lead and copper. It'd be nice to start that. We've already done that. We're working on the GSI and mapping, and then of course to create a map that specifically addresses the federal copper and lead. This map is not just, we're forced to do it, but it's not just to benefit the force, it's also to benefit that we need it for the city as a whole. The second step, of course, or objective is to complete a water system evaluation study to identify the needs and priorities for sustainable system. We've talked about the well, in particular, the Daughtery well. When we look at this, yes, we do need a study as a city as a whole. It doesn't mean we need to do it right now. The idea of taking on one well at the time was specifically because we needed temporary fix. Yes, they want to look at it long-term. It would benefit the city long-term. What we need is to understand that we have equipment that is operating nonstop. Lightning hits, we don't have a backup. We have to get a new pump to put it in and rewire. Ideally, the city would need to go out for an engineering study. And where are we at with all of our wells in the long term, in the well depths? The last time this was done, 2011. 2007. They did do a well study specifically. Of course, at the time, it's like, well, it looks good. We're gonna have water. Things change in 10, 15 years. Contracting with an engineering firm to oversee completion of the water system evaluation study. It's great when we go out with different engineers, but it's making sure it actually gets completed. We saw this with the last engineers we hired for an inventory assessment of our wastewater system. It just never finished. And then we paid out $80-something thousand for nothing we can use. And then identify funding opportunities, much like the wastewater side, it's sitting down and having that conversation. These are just, like I said, through this whole process, it's just step one. It's collecting the data, collecting the plan and moving forward. And how are we gonna do it? And putting it in writing. So if we say we're gonna work with an engineer, what engineer? Are we gonna use our current engineer? Are we gonna go out for a new engineer? Where's the money? Where's the money gonna come from? It's all of that. So each one of these actions can be broken down even further. We didn't because, like I said, this is just a rough in my brain, putting it on paper. So I would like us to have a discussion over it. If there's questions, if there's thoughts, how do we want to move forward? For me, the big thing moving forward is just the data, getting it in place so we can make smart decisions.
Want to go through the streets too? Just real quick.
I was gonna do water, wastewater first because they
Oh,
tie
yeah.
together.
So do we have someone who knows how to put together projects, plans and schedules?
The only person who would come closest to any type of background in that would be Mercy.
Because the expertise rests with the department heads,
Yes,
but their expertise is not doing a project plan.
correct.
And so we have this, in each of these strategic areas, the three areas, without a plan, it's very difficult to evaluate what needs to get done. So I really think that's an important element.
So you would like a timeline.
A timeline and a timeline for the major, for the scope. I mean, you've articulated here what needs to happen.
Like when we would go out for an RFP, when we, okay, so you want the particulars, the details.
I think that'd be really helpful, so you can hold your department heads accountable. We understand what's going on and we see how that's going to play out. Because we know there's not going to be enough resources all way around. Having a plan, so we look and say, okay, this is higher than this, and then we at least know where that's at, and we can make some decisions.
When you say this is higher than that,
I'm sorry,
when you say this is higher than this,
well, one priority,
Priority, okay.
a priority may be higher than another,
okay. Just,
because again, we don't have enough dollars to get everything done.
right,
Um,
and if we're doing, since I'm probably the person who gets asked to do this, I'm just clarifying. Um, in that plan, if we want specifics down, down to the level of when the RFP go out, is this assuming we have money, which I don't think we can do?
So in part, there's a scope of work that you gotta have a plan. It's no different than you gotta have a plan for the airport. What's our plan for the airport? How long it takes to play that out as we
Okay,
driven
so
by
just a
investment.
generic timeline, it'll
Yeah.
take 6 months to do this, 4 months to do it.
Well, I don't think it's generic. I think it's how long does it take to get things done?
Yes,
Put a date to it, who's accountable for it, and then head down that path. And so laying out that project plan. Marcy, I did this for building huge systems. I'm happy to sit down and walk through some thoughts with you.
I think, and I understand, I mean, I've had to do this for Pueblo Nuevo Park.
Yeah.
Because
So it's
not
exactly what-
Eddie's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But I think my sticking point is I wouldn't know where the start date should be without knowing that we,
October 1st, 2023.
okay.
Yeah, yes, that's where you're at, and you're gathering data around it. There's a lot of milestones here that are already done. You're gathering data that's gonna feed into that. Because you've already got a plan for 22, 23, you're already executing.
Yeah.
You've got some expectation what's gonna be done at the end, so 1 October going forward. And then the resources allocated to that on what else to.
Would that be similar to like a generalized Gantt chart?
Well, that's exactly Gantt charts. I mean, that's, precedence diagram methods in terms of playing all that out. You get this done, you work this done, you don't get this done, you get a backup, here's what you're gonna do, but it basically Gantt.
Well, I like it because people for me that don't understand it,
Oh, yeah.
at least I know,
It'd
what,
be a visual.
what it's gonna take. Yeah.
Definitely.
But
definitely.
it's definitely something we could keep on the website, a
Mhm.
specific,
Yeah.
I just had to. do
dedicated
a check
landing
for an
spot.
application.
Yeah.
and you could see, and then we could actually tag, certain areas like a red flag or something.
Yeah.
Why we're not moving forward, if it's a funding issue, or if it's a, this project is no longer a priority.
Yeah.
Not the case with these two, but
Yeah, because council is going to, in my opinion, we're gonna look at tier 1 for each of the major elements. Megan's gonna want to look at tier 2, the next level down. The department heads, they're gonna want to have the tier 3 all the way through in terms of what's going on. And it feeds up into, so we can track what's happening.
Okay, so 3 different essentially Gantt charts.
Well, it's not 3, it's a tiered system. We start with tier 1, tier 2 is more detailed, tier 3 is more detailed, tier 3 feeds tier 2.
Covering water, wastewater and streets.
I would do water, wastewater, streets, yep. Yep.
yeah, so
Those
it's
those are the 3 biggies,
our goals.
yeah.
all
Yeah.
And I think that's gonna help, like what you say, that people were wondering, okay, well, where did that money go for this? And where did that money
Yeah.
go? That, you have so many people, and I've heard it in town. Did somebody use it? Did somebody steal it? Where is it? How, it's missing. Well, it's not missing. It's just got thrown in maybe to general fund.
It was used
A
for
lot-
operating. 'cause I
Yeah,
spent
a lot
7
of
months
people
trying
don't
to-
understand that, and I
Yeah,
think that's gonna
yeah.
walk them through.
We're down Facebook or DJ embezzlement.
I know, I do a lot of things, but
Yeah.
I don't know how I have time in the day.
I don't either.
Then when that's actually laid out too, this whole process on the Gantt, then when we're setting the budget, we're basically setting them up for success.
You got it, that's exactly. it. Yep.
So definitely we can restructure that. I will put in a little side note here. Marcy is gonna be gone for a few weeks.
What?
Just to,
She's willing to let me work remotely.
Oh,
part of it. It's her time away with her family and her
Yeah.
son. I do value our employees taking time and.
so it's vacation time.
Well, it's
Both.
therapy. It's not gonna be a super fun.
Okay.
But yeah.
But just giving you a timeline.
Yeah,
I do work with her on these things. The next one, of course, is goal 3 is our streets. going back to the very first one is collecting that data. We did have a road condition survey done that kind of went through and told us good, bad kind of deal. It's taking that and really utilizing it a little bit more, working on a GIS for it as well. So that we can actually, so currently, and I know Rick has brought this up, we put it online and we have the little, and it's keeping that up to date.
Yes.
I do have to sleep. But keeping that up to date so that it's visual, a GIS system would be very visual, so you could see as the roads are being fixed and the outlines and the plans of the future. That is one of the priorities, is creating that and utilizing it. The second one, of course, is a complete comprehensive street system evaluation. As the builders brought up, it would be nice to know drainage. Are we needing to reevaluate our roads, not necessarily how we do them, but we may have outgrown our roads and developments, and we need to put in those infrastructures for curbing and drainage. Having that evaluation would assist with that. And of course, it's finding an engineer to do that. And the cost, where would the money come from? The big thing that you do hear a lot of is places being flooded. I know, Chris, you used some of your money to help the individual with the curbing, specifically because the water would go into the property. We do have parts of town that it floods. It could be coming back, and it may not only be a drainage issue, but it also may be, you know, reevaluating how we do roads. Hopefully that's not the full direction we go. But I understand when we seal coat, we add another layer.
One thing I think would be interesting for council, not to task you with another thing, but is we see, you know, in a sentence version of this of when a study was done. I think it'd be beneficial to see a timeline of when these studies were done. So we'd say, well, 2018 was the last time a study was done, 2019 last time a study was done, and maybe not so far deep into the past, but going forward.
So then I think we need to add a sheet, and remember, this will be a little bit of a packet for the strategic plan, providing the history and how we're moving forward, but add in a page that has a study timeline and basically just lists all the studies that have been done and put the dates of when they were done.
Okay, and then even categorizing them for what they are based off
Yes.
utility streets, et cetera, so we can kind of.
How often do we have to do these?
So ideally, and this is a lot of research on my end, and I want you to understand, when I talk to other cities and I do a lot of just, when was the last time someone did something? Depending on the type of plan. So your city comprehensive plan should be done every 10 years. It should be a 10-year plan if you're staying on track with the plan. If you get a whirlwind of money and you can complete the plan sooner, then you reevaluate and you do another one. They should be set in increments of 5 to 10 years. Some cities have a 25 and 50-year plan. A lot of the bigger cities have 50-year plans because they have that growth, that change, and that just everyday need for it. For us, I think we need 1, 3, 5, and then start developing into the town. I think it's important that when you look at your infrastructure, depending on what your comprehensive plan is, if you're planning for growth and you want the city to have another 2,000 residents, then your infrastructure plan should be able to accommodate that in the timeline you expect that growth. We've never put them together. And so ideally for the city, you want to have 5, 10, and they should every year. If you go to Sugar Land, the city of Salina, I love San Antonio. I think I just like their website, to be honest. You never know what you're gonna find. They're rotating their strategic plans regularly, but they're fast growing cities. Tyler's gonna be a huge one with getting the Samsung plan. So for us, I would say 10 years. It's dependent on your size.
Taylor's getting Sam's.
Taylor, did I say Tyler? So we'll include that additional page. Objective 3, of course, is the funding. So you'll see the pattern. It's the data, the plan, the funding. We're really lucky with this one because we are rural, and we can utilize SDOT for their transportation alternative programs. They have several grants that come down. that can help us. You also have to remember, when we look at different grant funding, we're no longer economically disadvantaged. So we miss out on a lot of those.
Live where I live. I'm here.
The city as a whole.
The only reason why we got the fire hydrants on the south side in 2018-19 was because we specifically grabbed the only part of town that was economically disadvantaged.
I'm happy to say that 3.3.1 should not. As of today, at 2:35.
Yes, we have submitted the mobility plan.
Good.
Yay. So the other part is when we talk about all of these planning and evaluations, is when grant opportunities come up. Marcy's not researching and trying to put a project together. She's submitting the evaluation already done by an engineer. So even if we had a shelf of engineer plans, but we're not gonna obviously address them all at once because we definitely don't have the funding, we can pull them and apply for them as they come up.
So a lot of our focus going forward is dollars. Yeah. The real world, we have to survive. Supposed to do a road rebuild every 28 years. So at what point will we talk about the strategy, given our resources, it's the need, because some are going to be higher priority than others. High traffic areas, we're going to spend time on those. But my sense is we need to have that discussion, doing the plan in terms of goals, and in terms of 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 are nice. They're not going to meet the needs that we have today.
So we will currently not meet the needs for this upcoming fiscal year.
So I understand that. Isn't it worthwhile? We have a strategy then that says, given we have 1,000 city blocks, what is our strategy going to be in a limited resource environment?
So I can tell you right now, Eddie and I have talked, and we are going to seal coat. And we are going to request that funds be allocated to outsource it.
And how many?
We're working out those details.
Okay.
So I just got the current seal coat list,
Yeah.
and we're working on the seal coat list. And we're gonna go through, we're also gonna use the bad list of that from that study.
Yeah.
And have we addressed them, and do we need to address them?
Okay.
So that's part of the departmental side.
Which is great. And in my view, that's part of what you're going to want out of us on council is to review from a priority standpoint as we see it. We dicker back and forth and you come up with a plan that makes sense because we're going to have to live with the bucket.
Yes.
Because it'll be interesting at some point. We're going to go through the questionnaire. When I look at the questionnaire is what's people's perspective on taxes. It's 3 said, hey, stay within the 3%. 1 says, you know, go out to the voters. Another said, live within the existing tax rate and take advantage out of increased property values. I don't care how you cut it, that only buys you $100,000 a year. I mean, just look at our property tax, $2 million. If you add on 3%, you're gonna get 60,000. Last year's addition of 45,000. So that's not gonna be the panacea for anything. And I just think it's gonna be important because we're gonna run out of time before too long here this evening. At some point, I think we kind of want to walk through that strategy that we've all talked about. You got the input from all of us and really have the, okay, here's the reality of the world. Let's talk about what that means.
So your questionnaires are being divided between the revenue and expenditures
Yeah, yeah.
in those workshops.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you, and this is where I have been quoted in the paper. At some point, the city may have to look at that.
Yeah, and so looking at that, I get that. How do we pay for that debt? What are the implications? Because you were on board and when I came on council, we had an $8.5 million debt. Okay, and we were sucking literally $750 million a year out of our operating money to go service that debt.
And we now have less, or we're at 3 million in debt.
Yeah, so that's the good news.
So we can put a little bit back. The good thing with the debt coming out for something like roads and stuff like that is the debt isn't tied to the general fund right now. It's about 600,000.
No, I know.
So the water that is, we want to make sure we go for the grant fund.
Yep.
And you're right, it's understanding the M and O and the INS.
Yep,
And
yep.
how are we gonna look at that?
Yep.
And that is a discussion we are gonna have. We've done really well with trying to live, but as you can tell, we're not moving forward with anything because we're trying to stay within.
Yeah, but even if we go out for debt, we're gonna suck $1 million out of our budget. I mean, that's the reality. So debt, as we all know from our own personal experience, we have a choice of living within our means or going and paying the interest of which we get no value. And debt makes sense if you think you're gonna grow substantially and you're gonna bring in more revenue, you have a way to pay it back. If you don't think you're gonna grow, just put debt out there isn't gonna buy you much, other than things get shiny, look good in the near term, but you end up losing the opportunity. I think that's gonna be a really important discussion for us to have. I think the sooner we have that, the better off we'll be. As I and Megan and I have talked when we got together, my view is, I think one of the next things we need to talk about from a budget standpoint and maybe change the order around is, what's our potential for revenue? But if you look at what was put together last year, because Megan did a great job looking at 5 years going forward. Page 19 of last year's budget showed us $15.4 million, and it shows this year, fiscal 23, being down to 14.8 million. Okay, and then you put on the expense side, going up to an additional 4.5%, that's an 8% differential. And in my mind, we as a council need to be having that discussion sooner than later. Because it doesn't matter what the taxes are, that's not going to cover it. Megan's suggesting we potentially have to go for debt, but if we're not going to grow, we have no way to pay it back. And all we do is hurt ourselves in the long term. So I think getting ready for this next session, I think it'd be helpful, Megan, as we really have that discussion, so we have.
So right now you have that set for June 13th and June 24th, correct?
So the 13th is
discussion.
expenses and the 24th is revenue. I can switch the 13th and the 24th, but the 8th, I have invited, you need to hear from the staff guys.
I do. But that's true. Would you switch the revenue to June 13th and then the expenses to the 24th? That work?
Yeah.
I tend to agree with what he said. You know, we have done a lot and we've done a good job of getting out in the community and what do y'all want and this and that. And that's been great, but we can't do anything that they're wanting right now. We don't know where the money's coming from. So I tend to agree with Rick that let's be realistic on what we've got.
And I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I do want to point out when we look at revenue and we look at expenses, your big expense is going to be staff. That's
Yeah,
where
of
most of
course.
the money is going to come from.
And that's where it should.
The second big expense is going to be your street department and then your police department. But I also want you guys to take into consideration when we have this revenue discussion, how much we do in kind, how much we provide our community at no cost.
Right.
And that's not typical of every community, especially where we're at.
Which is exactly why we want to have that discussion, because we know we're resource constrained. Part of what I'm looking forward to hearing is where we are in the water study, the gas study, those studies, which is about what do things cost and what are we charging? Because I think the strategy we have to talk about is, do we increase our what I call the usage stuff in order to create more revenue so that we're able to apply that on the side where we can't create revenue.
I would agree, and also take into consideration, we don't invest.
Yep.
And it's been unfortunate that I right now will not invest in anything, even if council requested it, without having additional supervisory accountability.
Yeah, no question.
Just because I'm playing two roles right now, I wouldn't want that responsibility and it would not look good. Oh, she moved $1 million. But it's investing for our future too.
No
We,
question.
we could invest our reserves and actually bring in additional revenue that we're not bringing, in, or we're missing opportunities.
Yeah.
When it comes to employees, like I said, I did invite them to the next
So
meeting.
next meeting's good. Okay, that's good.
As long as you guys are okay with that.
When we start looking at that too, I feel like when you are talking about revenues and everything else like that, our revenues are built on the past, which, we have a lot of delinquent properties and everything else like that. If we can prioritize some of this revenue to where street projects can maybe help economic development or whatever, like, so we're not building those buildings, but then increase all that kind of value and everything else. So that, just to reinvest in that kind of thing.
Next meeting. I do want to ask one question right now, because it's been on a lot of y'all's items in the questionnaire. When you're looking at the employees, I'd like some clarification on what you talk about in market relations. Are you talking about Alpine as the market? Are you talking about Texas as the market? Are you looking at the industry when we look at employee salaries?
In my view, running businesses, including an Alpine, I look to the local market. What do I need to pay to get an employee here? I know the oil fields pay a hell of a lot more money. I get it.
We lost one last Friday.
Yeah, and so one of the questions I had on my list is, and that's why I put it on the city council meeting for next week. And you're thinking, oh crap, here's where I can ask a question. Why are we losing employees? Okay. Is it only the financial side? What's driving it? Because I've done a bazillion comp benefit studies. I'm doing one right now for two foundations I'm the treasurer for. That are, and it's what do I hire people for in terms of their wages, their benefits, retirement, healthcare, all that stuff. And in my view, we're competing in this area, and I would say Tri-County area.
And in looking at why we're losing our employees, I've heard a totally different thing. So that employee that you say where he lost to the oil field, I've heard that that's where he's looking at going, but that's not why he left.
Well, and what they tell us and what we hear
Yeah,
in.
so let's, is there a way, do we do an exit interview or anything like that? And who is it done with? Does that make a difference into what they're going to say?
And it very well could be, that's something I could look at.
I think so, because I've heard totally different thing on that employee. And yes, he's looking, but that's where he's, okay, that's where I guess I'll go. But it wasn't a planned out thing like, hey, this isn't working, I want to change careers or something like this. It's just something that happened. And okay, well, I guess I'll try the oil field. So I think we need to look at that and into why we're really losing these employees and try to gauge, not just, okay, well, I'm going to go here or I'm going to do this, and see if there's anything internally going on that we need to be looking at.
Your struggle, Megan, is we live in a small town. The rumor mill is rampant. You almost probably want to get a third party anonymous to give you real feedback about what's going on. Because I think that'll really be helpful. Maybe cost you, I don't know, exit interview is going to cost you maybe $150. Probably really worthwhile for you to be able to get that independent view. So that people know it's not going to come back to them per se.
The talent pool is very small too.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I think we need to look at. I need personally right now, you have to be a high school graduate.
For most of our jobs, yes.
And I understand that, but like you said, Alpine doesn't have that kind of population to be able to be that picky. There are some people that I think would be willing to go work with the water department and get in there and work, but for
So-
whatever reasons, they
They
didn't.
can't work in the water department without a high school degree because they can't apply for the D license without a high school.
That's.
They can't do the job because TCQ will fine us.
Okay, so
That's
is,
what gets us.
So there are technical requirements they gotta meet in order to go into a particular department because of the licensing requirements.
so we, okay.
And throw the drug stuff in there. You
Yeah.
almost have fun with that.
Yeah, and then
So, and this is the hard part with a lot of our employees that are leaving. And there have been a handful that have left that I'm sorry, I'm gonna say better for the city. Because you hear one side of it, you don't hear both sides. And I'm not gonna publicly sit here and say, well, so-and-so did A, B, and C, and I'm not gonna tell you that they did A, B, and C. They're just unhappy because they got reprimanded and now they've left.
And now they
That's
get
why-
on Facebook and post about it. And it's like, yeah,
But
I wish I could tell you the real story.
But I think it'd be worth, like Rick says,
Yeah.
$50, something like that. Hey, and then this just has to be something that we're gonna do from now on. Maybe just for 6 months or something to get a kind of idea of what's going on.
I think I think it's great to try to be anonymous. I think unfortunately, if somebody leaves and then.
Everybody's gonna know
2
who
weeks
answered
later,
it.
oh,
Yeah, you might as well just do a Google exit
I
survey
think if
instead of
you
paying the
have a trend,
150.
That's where you go. I mean, I had 175,000 employees. Okay. I used it as a tool to find out where there are good managers, bad managers.
Right.
Some of it's managers, some of it's pissed off employees.
Right.
You know, and to Megan's point, there are two sides to every one of these discussions. But I
And
think you're
it'd
looking
be
for
hard
trends.
to be
Yeah.
completely anonymous around here.
Yeah, it would be different than 175,000 employees. We
Look,
have
look,
what, 69?
It was down to 6 people.
But in doing what he's saying, the exit interview is gonna be with just the employee that left.
Yeah.
You're not interviewing everybody in the department. You're interviewing,
That's how it
Chris.
currently is. It's just the employee and they don't put their name on it. They just literally mark some boxes, fill in a couple of things. Most of our employees have left for family and other jobs.
So, but you're trying to get trend data, and again, market data is really important. You know, we just did the ABA, we did the survey of 79 businesses in Alpine. Happy to share all that data with the city, because we have entry-level employees, minimum $9 an hour. Most businesses are paying was $20 an hour.
And Jim Street's email was a bit odd.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, that caused a little
Yeah, we
bit
had that.
of
one.
chaos.
Megan, I'm gonna have to walk through all that data. It was, Lisa Field had put all that together and I consolidated it into the integrated. I'm happy to walk through that with you to provide some insight for you that might be helpful.
So then my next question, and I'm really just, I need the insight, is are you guys looking at comparing what we pay our employees to someone who works at McDonald's, who works at Sonic, who works at? Are you gonna look at the average salary for an hourly employee?
But my view is you have different level employees who are gonna get different market data based upon the skill set of those jobs.
Yeah, I think you should look at McDonald, anything in Alpine. I think it also varies. If you're a young person, you're looking for the money. If you're an older
Our whole-
person,
Our whole system has changed. We have a lot of young.
and if you're an older person, you're gonna look at health benefits, you're gonna look at retirement.
Yep.
That's what I would be concerned. When I was in my 20s, I was gonna live forever, be healthy as a horse the whole time. So I was going for the cash. And as I talk-
Employee.
Yeah.
I look at the total annual salary. Because.
As an older employee, is that what you
As
said?
any employee, I've always looked at it that way, at any job I've ever taken,
Mhm.
because at $15 an hour, 40 hours a week. I take off 2 weeks, one for Thanksgiving, Christmas, so 50 weeks a year. That's almost $30,000. That's good for one person,
Right,
but that sucks for a family.
right.
And so I've always looked at it at how much will I be able to afford? Will I be able to afford rent, food, pay for my car? things like that.
Insurance, stuff like
So
that.
What you guys look for is different than what they look for.
Right, it depends on the age. Like my high school students, the ones that were graduating, that weren't going to college, it was the dollar, it was the
Right.
bottom line. But for somebody older, middle-aged, you start to realize, hey, yeah, I need that medical.
It's
And I
stability
want
and-
more time off so I can spend with my parents, my elderly parents, or, you know.
but you can also, you can't compare it to like to McDonald's and all that, because is McDonald providing you with all of these health insurance
Yes.
and all these other things that
Yes.
the city pays for, that McDonald's might be willing to give you 15, but you don't have insurance, you don't have any of these other things that you're gonna get, because I personally feels that all these things are part of your salary.
Well, when you look at the one ads, McDonald's is giving health insurance and they have a 401k. I didn't bring it with me tonight, but I
Is it,
saved.
is it
Just
for,
for clarification, a street employee starting at $13.50 a year costs the city $41,966.40
Sure,
in total annual compensation.
yeah, because it includes health and
It includes
Insurance.
everything, FICA, retirement,
Yeah.
workers' comp, unemployment, insurance, vacation, sick leave, holiday, additional, we call it other time, that would be funeral, jury. So roughly an employee who should work 2,080 hours puts in 1,832 hours, coming to a hourly rate with all benefits at $22.91.
So do we have a cafeteria plan option for the newer employees?
For Aflac, that's the only cafeteria then.
And when you say Aflac, I don't understand.
Aflac is a third party insurance company, yeah. Dental, that's only.
So they let- So they take the money out of their paycheck and put it, and it's pre-tax.
It's pre-tax and tax, depends on which fund you want.
Okay.
They don't have to take insurance though.
Our health insurance?
Yeah.
No, they can go with their
decide
spouse, sure,
that. Right.
but if you're a
Have-
single,
One employee not on city
So, but
insurance.
if we don't give them insurance, do we give them more money?
We can't.
We can't.
No,
because-
I looked into that because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So it is a particular process and formula that we have to provide them. And I can pull, let me talk to Riley with Encore, who does our brokering. So where we pay 600 and something a month, we would have to pay them closer to like 1,600. Because there's that, there's a factor to it. For how small we are, it is not worth it, as they said. If they said we could do it, but you're gonna spend more trying to get it put into place, then
So you're gonna, next week, or when we meet next, you're gonna educate us on this. Is what I hear.
June 8th.
June, that's next week.
Yes, it is.
Would it be possible, or have we ever reached out to Presidio of Fort Stockton and Marfa to get a parallel view of what a water
There you
worker
go.
one or something does?
That's the market.
there's
That would be the
salaries.
precise
Yes, we've
market.
done that multiple times,
Good.
Then are we in line with all that?
not for all the positions though.
Would that data be beneficial to see
It
where we're?
would, sure. Can we see that?
That's the market data.
Yeah, yeah, if maybe we can have it in our packet for June 8th.
There's also some good, Megan, we were talking about this a little bit today, but MIT has a good cost of living. It's different than a what are you actually getting paid, but it's the cost of living study countywide.
It's really fun.
Yeah, so that data would be pretty easy to get, Tri-County.
And Danny Bell's willing to help us. Marcy and I have looked at it. The information we got from the SPDC doesn't quite address the exact questions. It's more, here's all the data sets.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
Hello.
Danny Bell's working it for
Well,
us.
she's offered to help, and I feel kind of bad saying, here, you figure it out. Because it's not her field, and she's very clear that it wasn't her field,
But he's willing to help.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll let her help, please.
So when do we pumpkins or mice tonight?
Right now, let's adjourn.
Megan?
I'm not going home, but
Very helpful.
You never go home.
Very helpful.
Does anybody have, Martine, do you have,
it's step one.
we've been talkative, but
On this CDL, does the city help the employees with their CDL piece?
Yes and no. So I only say that because at the time that the city, and this is under like probably 4 different city managers, pushed for the employees to get their CDLs. None of the employees would get their CDLs, and it included a pay raise. Well, now the state has put in additional regulations on the CDL. So what once was you borrowing a city vehicle to go test, is now we have to send you to a week-long class that is gonna cost the city an average of $2,000 to $4,000 to give you $1 an hour raise. Do I want our employees to get CDLs? Yes.
is it still a possibility with Sol Ross? I know Dr. Munoz left. He was gonna try to bring that here. Do you know?
Odessa College, I guarantee you Sol Ross is not gonna do it.
So Odessa College, you think they would come to us?
So I'm working with
Munoz?
Munoz and with Carlos to try and figure out how we can get them here to lease Sol Ross facilities to bring the training.
That's great. Yeah, if they could
So we'll see-
partner together.
See if that plays out. Part of it's getting, summer's broken, so we're off working, but anyway, we're trying to do the same thing down south in Uvalde and the Rio Grande area.
So Ross did bring back the in-house testing. So we did go a year, 2 years without it. So now I know June 8th, we have employees going to test for their DMVs.
Okay,
So-
in-house utility testing.
Yes,
Okay.
which is great because we're not sending someone who's already nervous to another city.
Yeah, that makes it worse.
Take that 2-hour drive like.
And then they get there and they fail because, yeah, yeah.
And besides the application process, every one of our utility people are at the phase where they can test. They have to just apply. So,
And now we can do it at Sol Ross. Good deal.
so the city is definitely moving forward, but then as they get their licensing and they move forward, the compensation should be there.
Well, good deal. Okay, so June 8th, and y'all can print out what Darren was asking for regarding Marfa and Fort Stockton.
That gives me a better understanding of what you're looking at for market. We did an industry kind of looking at other cities comparable to Alpine and the positions. That's typically how it's been done in the past. That's the direction I took, but understanding that there were several terms used like market, looking at the city and then of course the tri-county.
The region. Good. All right, anything else before we leave?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. We really appreciate you being here. And Marcy, thank you for sticking. Here and helping out. Do what? Please, I mean, we want it, bring 10 people with you.
And Abel, thanks for being the citizen here.
Yes. Thank you, Abel.
Once it's covered parking.